Alexis was in a hurry to get home. She literally left for half an hour to buy medicine for her little son, Bobby. She stood in line for a long time, waiting for the pharmacist to sell all the necessary medicine to the elderly lady. Finally, Alexis managed to buy the needed remedy and ran home. Besides her 10-month-old Bobby, she had 2 other children. She was considered a mother of many children and received a certain amount of financial support from the state, but it was still not enough. Her eldest son, Paul, who had just turned 9, was looking after the children at home. The boy behaved bravely and helped his mother as much as he could. He changed diapers, fed his younger brother, put him to sleep and sang lullabies to him. In addition to all her chores, Alexis had to go to her shift today. She worked as an ordinary at a local hospital. Her whole family depended on her. Her husband Lawrence died 3 months ago. He was hit by a car when he was crossing the road. Alexis was devastated, left alone with 3 children. But soon she pulled herself together and continued to live. She did not dare to leave the children with the neighbours, mostly alcoholics or shady people who only asked her for money for drinking or complained about their worthless lives. Alexis tried to reason with them and explain that she had plenty of problems too, that these marginal personalities did not even realise how they were sinking to the bottom. These were the characters Alexis had to live next door to. However, she got used to them and taught her children to stay away from them. Rushing to get back home, Alexis did not notice that she was trying to cross the road in the wrong place. At some point, she almost had the same fate as her husband, but at the last moment, someone grabbed her by the sleeve of her coat. She turned around and saw an elderly woman in a shabby and torn clothes. It was obvious that she was a beggar. She appeared out of nowhere and literally pulled Alexis back onto the sidewalk at the last moment. A little more, and the mother of many children would have been hit by a car. Just at that moment, a car whizzed by at full speed. The driver did not even think of slowing down, although he understood perfectly that he was in the city, not on a high-speed highway. Exhaling, Alexis guiltily lowered her head. The woman who saved her appeared around 60 years old. The stranger adjusted her scarf and looked at Alexis with a heavy gaze. "Why are you running so fast, dear? Do you want to get to the other world with such haste?" she asked with a reproach look. Blushing from surprise and perhaps from shame for her rash intention, Alexis quietly replied, "No, I was just rushing home to deliver medicine. My youngest child got sick, and I have 3 of them in total. There's no one to take care of them properly. Only my eldest son helps, and he's just 9 years old." The beggar shook her head and offered Alexis a seat on the bench near the bus stop for a minute. Unlike most homeless people, she didn't emanate any unpleasant smell, and Alexis noticed that she seemed to be taking care of herself. Her nails were clean, and her teeth were in place. It seemed like she had accidentally become homeless. The woman expressed sympathy for Alexis's difficult family situation and offered her help. "Dear, maybe I can help you." "Are you serious?" Alexis asked, frowning her thick eyebrows. "Of course I am. I love kids," she replied with a smile on her face. "By the way, my name is Karen. I'm glad to meet you." "Nice to meet you too. I simply don't think—" Alexis started, but Karen interrupted her. "Don't look at my poor clothes. It's a separate story. I'll tell you someday. And don't be afraid of me. I won't steal anything from you or hurt your kids." However, Alexis still had reasonable doubts about this woman, since she had never seen her before and didn't even know what she really did. Alexis was perplexed and didn't know whether to accept Karen's offer or refuse it. A stranger was in front of her, but at the same time, her elderly eyes radiated only with kindness. Alexis saw a sea of possibility in them, as if the closest, dearest person was looking at her. Thoughts kept swirling in her head. What if she agreed? Wouldn't there be a catch? At the same time, Alexis was in a hopeless situation. There really was no one to take care of her children. Even her friend couldn't help her. She called her once and asked her to look after the kids, but she replied that she had a date with a man. After weighing the pros and cons, Alexis agreed to Karen's proposal. She had no other choice. She needed to be at work that day. 20 minutes later they arrived at Alexis's neat apartment, which showed the owner's industriousness. Karen looked around and said, "It's a cozy and warm place." "We try our best," Alexis shrugged. "Come on in, let's have some tea." The children came out of the room when they heard the noise in the hallway. They immediately started asking, "Who are you?" "Aunt Granny." Tears welled up in Karen's eyes. She took out a handkerchief from her pocket and wiped her face. Seeing her agitation, Alexis jokingly replied to the children, "Yes, this is Grandma, but just for an hour." The children didn't understand what "for an hour" meant, but the most important thing was that they heard Grandma. They immediately smiled and started hugging the elderly woman. She almost cried again from surprise, but managed to hold back. Then little Bobby took his medicine and soon felt a little better. Alexis took his temperature just in case, and it turned out not to be critical. After giving Karen some tea, she started getting ready for work and gave her some instructions. "If Bobby's temperature rises again, give him fever-reducing syrup." "Okay, I got it. You don't have to worry about anything." She nodded. "I'll do everything as needed." "All the medicines are on the shelf in the cabinet." Alexis continued to explain and pointed to the glass cabinet. "If you want to eat something, there's soup and meatballs with pasta in the fridge. There's also formula on the table in the kitchen. Paul knows, he'll show you." "Everything will be fine. I didn't come here for the food." Karen tried to calm her down. "You can go to work and don't worry about anything." Alexis nodded, but in her thoughts she said, "How can I not worry? These are my children." However, Alexis's intuition told her that there was nothing to worry about, and Karen was incapable of causing harm to anyone. With this in mind, Alexis went to work with confidence, knowing that everything would be fine at home. As she walked to the hospital, troubling thoughts about her difficult life after her husband's death lingered in her mind. Alexis had a hard time with no one to turn to for help. Among her acquaintances, there were no people who could provide meaningful support. She often found herself in dead-end situations and had to find a way out on her own. Alexis couldn't even imagine what would happen if she gave up. Most likely, life's problems would have crushed her, and her children would be sent to the orphanage. However, Alexis managed to avoid all of this, mostly thanks to her dead husband, Lawrence, who, although an orphan, knew how to find a way out of any situation. She remembered how they urgently needed to pay for their eldest son's treatment. Alexis called all her acquaintances, but was unable to gather the required amount. Her husband then made a deal with the neighbour to help him finish his summer house. In the end, Lawrence earned money for medicine, going beyond himself for his child. Alexis remembered this. Now, when she had to think about who would take care of the children, she put aside her principles and worries. Her parents had long since become alcoholics, and expecting help from them was pointless. But even in the past, when they were still leading a sober lifestyle, her mother told her right away, "You got married, which means you grew up, so figure it out yourself and don't bother us." How could she hope for any help after that? With these heavy thoughts, Alexis was hurried to work, but no matter how fast she walked, she still arrived late. In the reception room, Dr. Whitaker met her with a stern gaze. That's a shame. Where have you been? If this happens again, I'll fire you or take away your bonuses. Alexis almost cried in response. I'm sorry, Dr. Whittaker, it won't happen again. Bowing almost to his feet, Alexis scurried to her locker. Her partner, Julia, who just a couple of months ago came to work here, was already changing her clothes. Seeing Alexis panting, she asked with a smile, Hi, why are you breathing so heavily? Were wolves chasing you or something? If only. Alexis shook her head. I was running to work, hoping to make it on time, but ended up being late. As luck would have it, Dr. Whittaker was in the reception room, and he gave me a hard time, threatening to fire me if I was late again. This one might, Julia said sadly. Listen, I keep forgetting to ask you, who do you leave the children with when you go to work? Well, usually with Paul, my oldest son, Alexis replied, but today a woman is helping me. I met her accidentally on the street. She looked like a beggar, but she saved me from death. I wanted to cross the road in an improper place where we usually run, and I almost got hit by a car. What a gift from fate! And what, after that, did you invite her to your house? Yes, well, we agreed that she would take care of the children tonight. Karen seemed like an honest woman. I haven't seen her documents, but she looks around 60. I don't think people are capable of anything bad at that age. Oh, you naive thing! Julia shook her head reproachfully. Are you really leaving your children with just anyone? She probably already robbed your apartment, and the kids are running around hungry and calling for their mum. No, she won't do that. Alexis shook her head negatively. Okay, as you wish. Let's go to work. Otherwise, Dr. Whittaker will really fire us all. In principle, they had nothing to fear about being fired, as being a hospital orderly took all their strength and nerves. They didn't get paid much for it, and there weren't many people in the city who wanted to take care of sick people, but there wasn't much to choose from, so they had to work where they could at least get paid steadily. While Julia began to wash the floors in the hallway, Alexis went to the wards to turn over the bedridden and change bedpans. She continued to think about her children. Her colleagues' doubts about Karen had lodged in her head like a splinter. Alexis began to worry that something might have really happened to them. At some point, she even suspected that her friend might be right. At the same time, her intuition told her that her worries were in vain, and she was just winding herself up, creating more emotional problems. Not noticing someone's abandoned slippers near one of the beds, she almost tripped over them. She managed to keep her balance, but the bedpan fell loudly to the floor. The elderly woman lying in the adjacent bed grumbled and called for the doctor. After a few minutes, Dr. Whittaker arrived and asked, "What happened? Why the noise?" "Get your orderly under control. She won't let me rest," muttered the old woman. "What happened, Alexis?" the doctor asked sternly. "I just didn't notice someone's slippers and almost fell. The bedpan slipped from my hands, causing noise in the whole ward," she tried to explain. "Okay, I'm giving you a warning. Keep working." The doctor wagged his finger at Alexis and left the ward. The incident was over, but Alexis felt a bitter taste in her mouth. She was scolded for simply doing her job properly. Once again, Alexis realized that being an orderly was a thankless job. As she left the ward, she leaned against the wall and quietly cried. Julia was washing the floor when she saw her in this state. "What happened? Who hurt you?" "As usual, I got caught in the crossfire," Alexis replied through tears and told her colleague just what had happened in the ward. "No conscience at all. They could at least say thank you." Julia shook her head. "On the other hand, at their age it's quite expected, and some of them aren't even happy to have lived that long." "You're right," Alexis agreed, feeling a little calmer. "Sometimes I imagine myself old, and it almost makes me feel sorry for them. It's really hard for them. and we just can't understand them." The conversation about the incident in the ward ended when Dr. Whittaker appeared and stared at them intently. Julia moved on to wash the floors, and Alexis continued her rounds. It turned out that he sympathized with Alexis and even tried to court her, but he had children and a wife, and he dreamed of making Alexis his mistress. Alexis knew about this and rejected his advances in every way possible. She had no intention of becoming a kept woman or having anything to do with such an unbalanced and, most importantly, married man. It was hard to expect anything good from him. Dr. Whittaker was angry because he couldn't understand why Alexis resisted him. He offered her his love and gifts, promising to make her a queen. "I'll do everything for you," he would say when they were alone. "No, thanks. I'd rather be alone than with you." She would shake her head in refusal. By saying this, Alexis had only encouraged the man, but she could not even think of associating with a married man. After finishing their rounds, she joined Julia, and together they quickly cleaned all the floors. Then they returned to their room. "I advise you not to pay attention to Dr. Whittaker," Julia said, turning on the kettle. "If you mean his threats, then I've already forgotten about everything." Alexis waved her hand. "Let's eat some more fresh gingerbread. They haven't gone stale yet." Slowly carrying out their work, Alexis didn't even notice that the end of the shift was approaching. She looked at the clock and muttered to herself, "Another workday has passed." "Did you say something, Alexis?" Dr. Whittaker unexpectedly came up behind her. "Yes, I'm glad that everything is in order with the patients," Alexis confidently and without hesitation replied. "Of course, they are under my observation," the man proudly said. Alexis didn't say anything, just nodded her head. She barely had the strength not to laugh. It seemed that he was trying to prove to everyone that he was the best doctor. Having waited for the end of the shift, Alexis quickly changed clothes and rushed home. While running, she worried about how the children spent the day. She hoped that if Paul never called her, then everything was all right. Entering the apartment, she smelled pancakes. The children immediately came out of their rooms. They looked full and clean. It seemed that the guest had already fed and bathed them. Alexis was shocked to see this. "You're a real magician, Karen." Paul carried the younger Bobby in his arms and proudly said, "Mum, he's feeling better. He doesn't have a fever anymore." Alexis placed her hand on his forehead and was surprised to find that it was no longer hot. "I made him a herb compress. The syrup was helpful, but traditional medicine was even better," the elderly woman responded. "I don't even know what to say," Alexis said, bewildered. "I thought there would be clutter and filth." "Is that what you wanted to say?" Karen asked. "Well, not entirely like that, but something similar." Alexis nodded. "But now I look around and can't believe my eyes." "Don't be surprised. I promised that everything would be fine," Karen said, bowing her head. "Sit at the table and try it. The children have already eaten, but if they want more, there's enough for everyone." Alexis couldn't hold back her tears and hugged Karen. "You're my guardian angel." These words were like balm to Karen's soul. After calming down, the women sat down at the table to drink tea with pancakes. They were so delicious that Alexis didn't even notice how she ate 5 in a couple of minutes. After satisfying her hunger, she cautiously asked, "Excuse me for asking, but how did you end up in such a situation?" "You know, Alexis, I don't really have anything to tell you," Karen replied. "I barely remember anything. I woke up in some ditch without documents or money. That was 6 months ago. There was a wound on my head. I could hardly stand up." "What a horror! And there was no one around? Alexis asked, putting her hands to her face in sympathy. Why not? Karen shrugged. Some vagrants picked me up and took me to their shack. They gave me clothes because mine were no good. Who knows how long I had to lie in that ditch. So I put on what they gave me. There was no other choice anyway. I don't even remember how it all happened. Did you try going to the police? Alexis continued to ask. Are you kidding? Karen replied with annoyance. I went there, explained my situation, and they didn't even take a statement. I don't understand. Did they stop protecting people here? Alexis was surprised. There was a local police officer who told me that I was getting in the way of helping decent people. Tell me, Alexis, am I an indecent person and unworthy of respect? The elderly woman burst into tears, and Alexis handed her a handkerchief. No, it's not true. You're a good person, she reassured Karen. You just happened to meet a heartless police officer. Maybe. That's why I left without getting any help. The woman shook her head. I feel sorry for you. You were just a victim of circumstance, and as for the police, there's always a rusty bolt in the mechanism. Deep down, Alexis not only sympathized, but also was outraged that no one had helped Karen. The woman had lost her memory and found herself on the sidelines of life. After thinking a little, Alexis suggested, Stay with us. We have enough room, and the children, as I understand it, are happy to have you. Are you sure about that? Karen asked cautiously. I'm truly grateful to you, so I ask that you continue to look after the children. Alexis stood her ground. I work shifts as a hospital orderly, and unfortunately, my children are often left alone. Okay, I understand you, and I agree, especially since I have nowhere else to go, replied Karen. Karen's face lit up with a happy smile that she could now live in humane conditions and no longer waste time searching for food. After agreeing on what to do and when, Alexis continued to work calmly at the hospital. Dr. Whittaker still made attempts to court her, but Alexis did not want anything to do with him, so she avoided him if she could. Once, Julia asked Alexis, So how's your homeless woman doing? Has she stolen anything else from the apartment? Oh my God, where do you get these thoughts? Alexis responded, annoyed. We're getting along just fine. I've never met anyone before who could help like that. Nothing surprising. There are such people everywhere. Julia shrugged. Well, name one person who helped you, Alexis suggested. Julia hesitated with her response. See, and it's unlikely that anyone will do it unless there's a direct benefit in it, Alexis said. You know, my friend, you're right, Julia agreed, and I apologize for kidding at you about that beggar. Her name is Karen, and she's also like a mother to me, Alexis corrected her. And let's not discuss this poor woman's life anymore. Life has already dropped her to the bottom. Let's not gossip about her anymore. Okay, I'll keep quiet. Excellent. Let's get to work, said Alexis, and patted Julia on the shoulder. And they went to do their duties. This conversation was the last one about Karen in this way. Julia no longer tried to pick on Karen. On the contrary, she became interested in Karen's health and what she was doing. It seemed that Alexis's colleague also sympathized with her, especially since Alexis told her that Karen had lost her memory. Julia even passed things through Alexis to her guest. Julia's mother had passed away 6 months ago, leaving behind a lot of clothing. Julia didn't dare to throw it away, but this was a chance to find a use for it. Karen thanked Julia and invited her for a cup of tea and pie. No matter what, the elderly woman knew how to cook deliciously, though she didn't remember where she got such abilities from. 3 weeks had passed since Karen appeared in Alexis's apartment. During this time, Karen had fully adapted to normal life. The children had also become accustomed to her and, strangely enough, called her Grandma. They thought she had gone away for some time and had returned. Moreover, Alexis didn't think of dispelling their assumptions. They lived like one big family. Meanwhile, Alexis couldn't get Karen's memory loss out of her head. It was unbelievable that she didn't have any relatives. Someone had to be looking for this woman. However, Alexis didn't know who or where exactly, but she hoped to receive information soon. She addressed to volunteers with a request to search for Karen's relatives. She briefly told them what had happened and provided photos from her phone. When she took pictures of Karen, the volunteers promised to help. The volunteers started the search and kept in touch with Alexis. However, there wasn't much to share. In the places where the homeless usually went, no one knew Karen. They showed her photos, but homeless people only repeated the same phrase, "We don't know anything." It was surprising that Karen spent so much time among them, and they didn't remember her. Or maybe they just didn't want to get involved, afraid that they would be taken into the police, as many of them already had problems with the law. For example, the lack of documents. The homeless did not care about this fact, but the law enforcement officers could be seriously interested in it, and that's why the homeless didn't want to be in contact. At the same time, the search continued, and the volunteers promised to do everything possible. Meanwhile, Alexis herself tried to find her, using social networks and other internet resources. Karen watched her actions and just lamented. "I don't think anything will come out of this. If I had loving relatives, they would have somehow shown up with their searches. I'll still try to look for her if you don't mind," Alexis continued. "Of course, I'm all for it, but I'm sorry to disturb you," Karen said guiltily. "Get rid of all these gloomy thoughts," commanded Alexis. "You don't disturb anyone. Just look how the guys became cheerful when you appeared. It's just a fairy tale, not reality." Alexis continued the search, which soon became known at work. While Julia supported her, all the other employees joked, and some even made gestures at their temples saying, "You're just going crazy helping some beggar. She's just an ordinary woman, just with life difficulties." Alexis tried to convince them. "You don't understand anything about it, so don't judge, and you won't be judged." In general, almost everyone in the team, except for Julia, believed that Karen was just fooling her and tried to dissuade Alexis from further searches and to send Karen to the shelter. But Alexis was not the kind of person to stop at difficulties. She believed that she could find Karen's relatives. At the same time, Dr. Whitaker's advances drove Alexis to a nervous breakdown. She didn't have time for love games, but he just wouldn't let up. So one day she responded to him rudely. "Why don't you go far away and for a long time? I already have a bunch of problems and you're still bothering me. What's wrong with you? You have a wife, so go bother her. And as for the beggar, as you called her once, she's just as human as anyone else, including you, and her problems are my problems. I'll show you." The doctor snarled and tried to grab her. At that moment, employees began to gather in the corridor, drawn by the noise. They decided to find out what was going on and were surprised to witness a scene of a quarrel between the doctor and orderly. "What? Are you all here? Don't you have work to do?" Dr. Whitaker shouted at them. "You should shout louder so the patients can hear you," Alexis replied sarcastically. "Anyway, you're not working here anymore," Dr. Whitaker summed up. "I'm firing you. Pack up and get out." "Fine, as you want." The employees were left tongue-tied with surprise and began to whisper to each other. They hadn't expected this culmination. Everyone had hoped that the head doctor would calm down and the conflict would be resolved peacefully, but no, he went all in and fired Alexis. She received her payment and left the hospital. Before saying goodbye, she visited Julia, who was shocked when she found out what happened. She had been in another building at the time. "I just can't believe he did that," she said. "It's okay, I'll make it through," Alexis reassured her. "I'll find another job. Maybe try some private clinics. Don't worry, I won't disappear. I've been through worse. Life doesn't stand still." "You're an optimist," Julia said in surprise. "Sometimes I am amazed by myself too," Alexis smiled. "Not so long ago, when Lawrence died, I didn't even know how to go on living. It seemed to me that the whole world had turned dark, and the earth had turned upside down. You can't imagine what it's like to be left alone with 3 children in your arms. But it's okay. The main thing is not to lose heart." Alexis winked and left the hospital building. She was no longer attached to this place. Of course, it was a shame that her work experience was interrupted. On the other hand, Alexis had a whole pile of problems that needed urgent attention. Recently, volunteers had informed her that they had found a lead. They gave Alexis the address of the alleged Karen's son. However, Tyler lived 100 kilometers away in a neighboring city. Alexis wondered why he had not been able to find his mother. "Well, we don't know. We just happened to run into him. The thing is, we also collaborate with animal shelters," the volunteer explained. "So Tyler came there to ask what to do with his cat. She missed her owner and didn't give anyone any peace." "I don't understand. What does the cat have to do with it?" Alexis asked. "The cat belonged to Karen," Alexander continued. "At the shelter, Tyler shared his troubles with one of the employees. That's how we realized that he was Karen's son. Here's Tyler's address. Go and tell him the good news. We didn't do it ourselves. We thought you'd give him a surprise." "That will be a surprise indeed," Alexis agreed. "Thank you, I owe you." "We were interested in participating in the search ourselves," the volunteer shrugged. Alexis took the piece of paper with Karen's son's address. She didn't tell anyone yet. She needed to be sure that he was truly her son. After knowing about the shelter and the cat, Alexis suspected that Tyler might have gotten rid of his mother himself. If he probably wanted to get rid of a cat, it would not be difficult for him to send a person to the other world. Regardless, there was no point in guessing. Alexis went to meet Tyler, but before that, she instructed Karen, "Don't spoil them with sweets too much, or they'll get used to it." "And are you leaving for long?" Karen cautiously asked Alexis. "I think just today. Well, maybe 2, no more," Alexis replied thoughtfully. Karen came out to bid farewell their mother and hugged her. Smiling back at them, she kissed each one. Alexis headed to the station to catch the first train to the neighbouring city, and soon arrived at the address. It was a 3-story house that looked like a palace. Alexis had never seen such beauty before. Shivering as if it were cold outside, Alexis approached the door and rang the bell. After a few minutes, footsteps were heard and a man in his 30s appeared on the doorstep. He looked at Alexis, then nodded his head as if to ask who she was and what she wanted. For a few seconds, Alexis was at a loss, but then she took out some photos from her bag. The homeowner was shocked when he saw the picture. "Where did you get this? And where is my mother?" His hands were shaking. "She's fine. She's with me," Alexis replied. "But I'm interested in how Karen ended up in another city." "We'll talk inside." Tyler invited her in. Alexis went inside and was even more surprised. The beauty outside was just the tip of the iceberg. The real luxury was in the interior of the house. There were antique furnitures and paintings, marble tiles on the floor. Noticing the guests' confusion, he cautiously said, "This is all that's left of my father. He was an antique dealer." I see, Alexis nodded. And I thought you were the one who bought it all. No, I'm just an ordinary middle-class businessman. He waved his hand. My father did what he liked while I was doing in business. All of this is impressive, of course. Alexis changed the subject. But I just can't understand how your mother disappeared. It happened half a year ago. Tyler began his story. I bought my mum a ticket to the sea. She had wanted to go there for a long time, but soon after she left, she disappeared. The phone was silent, and I didn't know what to do. Did you try to find her? Alexis asked. Of course. I travelled all over the city, but with no result. Tyler nodded. It's strange that with your resources you couldn't find your mother, Alexis said thoughtfully. Don't be fooled by the luxury, Tyler repeated. I understand, Alexis nodded. Get ready. We'll go to your mother's place. Maybe she'll remember something. Oh? What's wrong with her memory? Tyler asked with horror. I don't know. Maybe she has amnesia after the hit. Alexis shrugged. Oh my God. After hit? Only stop talking. We're going to her just right now, but I need 1 more minute to call Chloe and let her know I'm going out, Tyler said, getting ready. Chloe? Who's she, if it's not a secret? Alexis asked. Well, she's kind of my fiancée, Tyler answered uncertainly. Why kind of? Alexis asked. You see, we still can't get married, Tyler replied with frustration. First, my mother disappeared, then other problems. So I decided that there will be no wedding until my mother is found. You could have married by now, especially since so much time has passed, Alexis said. Let's not talk about my fiancé now. What's important to me right now is to see my mum, Tyler said. An hour later they arrived at Alexis's hometown. As they approached her apartment, Alexis asked quietly, Are you ready? Yes, Tyler replied, and Alexis opened the door. A few seconds later, Karen appeared in the corridor. Upon seeing her, Tyler shouted through the apartment, Mum, you're alive! Alexis, is this my son? Karen asked, confused, and started crying. Yes, it's him, Alexis replied. It can't be. My dear son, I don't believe it. Karen continued to cry. It's me, Mum, Tyler, your own son. He reached out his arms, trying to hug her. Karen didn't push him away and hugged him too. Alexis expected the meeting to be more modest, considering that her guest had memory problems. However, everything turned out differently. Karen burst into tears, recognizing her son, and at the same moment loudly said, Exactly. I remembered. It's your fiancé who's guilty. I don't understand. In what sense? Tyler asked with undisguised surprise. Wait, I don't feel well. Karen waved her hands and began to lean on Tyler and Alexis. After catching her breath, Karen looked at everyone with tearful eyes and said, It was a mistake, son, getting involved with her. I knew something bad would happen. The stress from meeting her son affected Karen, and she gradually began to remember events from that misfortunate day. It turned out that Karen really was going to the sea. She wanted to relax on the warm sand and tan under the southern sun. Tyler bought her a ticket and booked a good hotel, just a couple of minutes' walk from the sea. He thought he was giving his mother a gift. However, the cause of all her problems was Tyler's fiancée. It was she who incited her acquaintances to get rid of Karen. However, they not only hit her on the head from the back, it was she who incited her acquaintances to get rid of Karen. However, they not only hit her on the head from the back, but managed to mention Chloe. Leave Chloe alone. Don't interfere with her and Tyler, Karen said. Are you serious? Tyler asked in horror. Yes, as strange as it sounds. But your Chloe wanted to kill me. Karen nodded. The elderly woman went on to talk about how she was originally against their relationship. Karen saw through Chloe, and that's why she insisted that they sign a prenuptial agreement. Tyler was skeptical at the time about the usefulness of such formalities, but his mother convinced him that it would be better, and in the end he agreed. But the bride categorically refused, and then his mother went to the sea and disappeared. I knew your relationship wouldn't end well, the mother ended her story. I'm sorry, Mum, for God's sake, Tyler cried. I was blind, like a kitten. I didn't notice anything around me. Later, Tyler called his friends and asked them to shake out from his ex-fiancée all the information about the attempted murder of his mother. Under their pressure, she confessed everything and gave up her accomplices. They were soon arrested, and during the investigation, they confessed that everything was planned by Chloe. It was she who persuaded them to keep an eye on Karen at the nearest station and kill her. When Karen got off at the station to have a fresh evening air, they chose the moment, hit her, but someone scared them away. In general, they threw Karen's body into a ditch, took her documents, money, and ran away. Thus, they covered their tracks, so that if anything happened, the case would be investigated in another city. However, they informed Chloe that the job was done and received money from her. Tyler was shocked when he learned about everything. Karen soon regained her memory completely and was able to find out that her son had been hoping and waiting all this time. So, half a year has passed. Tyler started a relationship with Alexis, especially since his mother approved, and soon he proposed to her. The woman was over the moon with happiness. She burst into tears and said, "In sorrow and in joy, until the end of our days, I agree to become your wife." Even the pigeons took flight and circled over them at the sound of her voice. It was a good sign that indicated two loving hearts had found each other. The Alexis's children and Karen watched from the sidelines. Karen became the children's real grandmother. She approached Alexis and Tyler and blessed their marriage. A month later, they got married, and Alexis and the children began to prepare to move into Tyler's house. But in her hometown, Alexis had a debt to pay. Tyler was surprised when Alexis asked him to take her to the hospital where she had been fired. Alexis easily found Dr. Whitaker, who was making his rounds among the patients. Without hesitation, she began to tell him everything she thought of him and what he deserved. To his misfortune, his wife was at the hospital this time. She heard everything. What happened after that cannot be put into words. Poor Dr. Whitaker searched for a place to hide from his enraged wife, but still got an earful from her. It's a good thing he survived. After such a quarrel, he suddenly lost all desire to flirt on the side. Finally, all the business was finished, and Alexis and her children left the city for their new life.
Hola, suscríbete a Historias Vitales para no perderte nuevas historias. Mi esposa había estado trabajando en su proyecto especial durante 4 meses ahora. No era su proyecto personal, pero ella era la persona principal y responsable de su éxito. El proyecto estaba diseñado para salvar a su empresa, Bixler Enterprises. Los últimos 4 meses habían sido difíciles porque se vio obligada a trabajar duro. Era importante tanto para ella como para la empresa. Había una buena posibilidad de que Bixler Enterprises quebrara si el proyecto no se completaba. Sara tenía una licenciatura de Albrecht y un MBA de Wharton. Era la más inteligente de la familia. Yo empecé a trabajar como mecánico de autos justo después de la secundaria y después de 21 años seguía siendo mecánico de autos. No me importaba porque me gustaba el trabajo y pagaba bien. Era suficiente para pagar la universidad de Sara y criar a 2 hijos. No vivíamos lujosamente, pero estábamos bien. Los niños ya se habían mudado, y las cosas iban bastante bien con nuestros ingresos. Sara quedó embarazada 3 meses después de casarnos a la edad de 18 años. Durante los primeros años de nuestro matrimonio, vivimos con mis padres. Ellos tenían una gran casa vacía ya que 4 de mis hermanos se habían mudado. Eso significaba que teníamos una niñera mientras Sara completaba sus primeros años de universidad. Debido a 2 embarazos, la carrera de 4 años le llevó 6 años completarla. Fue difícil, pero lo logró. Siempre tuve trabajo y nunca me faltó trabajo extra si lo necesitaba. Después de que Sara se graduó de Wharton, alquilamos nuestro propio lugar. Tuvo ofertas de trabajo de varias empresas grandes, pero todas requerían que nos mudáramos. A mí no me importaba, pero Sara quería quedarse cerca de casa. Por eso decidió trabajar en Bixler Enterprises. Pagaba bien, pero lo más importante, le daba responsabilidad y la oportunidad de avanzar. Sara era una empleada trabajadora y dedicada. La presentación es el jueves en el Hotel Thyssen en Filadelfia. Tomé unos días libres en el trabajo para ayudarla según fuera necesario. Al final, todo lo que logré fue hacerle algo de comer cuando llegaba a casa. No sabía nada sobre su trabajo, ni tampoco quería saber, los negocios corporativos de alto nivel me aburrían. Empresarios de Europa, Asia y América del Sur venían aquí, la empresa pagaba sus boletos de avión y proporcionaba habitaciones en el Hotel Thyssen mientras estaban aquí. Era caro como el infierno, y por algunas cosas que Sara había dicho, la empresa estaba sobreestimando sus finanzas. Su presentación era importante para ella, para la empresa y para más de 200 empleados. Hasta el martes por la noche, todo iba bien. Sara llegó a casa con un traje nuevo, un traje gris con una blusa blanca. Desplegó todo lo que necesitaba en la cama de la habitación de invitados. Cuando se trataba de la limpieza de la casa, ella era normal, pero cuando se trataba del trabajo, era meticulosa. No entendía por qué necesitaba sacar su ropa interior de lujo, pero no dije nada. Además de su traje para la presentación, tenía varios vestidos de cóctel lindos para eventos sociales antes y después del evento. Siempre había evitado tales eventos, pero me sentía obligado a ir con ella si ella quería que lo hiciera. Me agradeció la oferta, pero dijo que no era necesario. Todos los materiales y equipos que necesitaba estaban guardados ordenadamente en el maletero de su Volvo. Antes de salir del trabajo, ella misma conducía el coche para asegurarse de que todo estuviera en perfectas condiciones. Tenía todo el día miércoles para prepararse y toda la noche del miércoles para socializar con sus invitados. Sara era tan buena en lo que hacía que sentía que habría sido mejor si simplemente me hubiera mantenido alejado de ella. Finalmente, había terminado. Lo había revisado y vuelto a revisar todo. Todo lo que necesitaba ahora era una ducha caliente y una buena noche de sueño. Supongo que mi error fue que empecé a revisar sus cosas después de que Sara comenzara a ducharse. Pensé que estaba ayudando, pero resultó ser lo contrario. Estaba moviendo cosas en la cama cuando un pequeño sobre blanco cayó del bolsillo lateral de su bolso de maquillaje. Una carta de una farmacia, pero no del tipo que solemos usar. Dentro había 10 pastillas. No tenía idea de qué era, Pren, y las instrucciones eran confusas. Si es necesario, tomar una pastilla y luego una segunda pastilla 12 horas después. Pensé que podría ser algo que ella había conseguido para la ansiedad o los nervios, pero las instrucciones no tenían sentido. La receta estaba escrita a su nombre el lunes. Volví a poner el sobre en su lugar mientras ella terminaba de ducharse. Decidí que quería saber más sobre Pren antes de contarle sobre ello. Por supuesto, si lo mencionaba, significaría que estaba revisando sus cosas. Odio los dilemas. Mientras Sara se preparaba para dormir, fui a nuestro ordenador doméstico y busqué. 10 minutos después, me uní a mi esposa bajo las sábanas. Pasé toda la noche despierto, preguntándome por qué mi esposa había recogido una receta para la píldora del día después, especialmente después de que me hicieran una vasectomía hace 10 años. A la mañana siguiente, me levanté temprano, pero no estaba descansado. Di un largo paseo, esperando que despejara mi mente. Me dirigí hacia casa con reticencia, temiendo lo que podría hacer o decir cuando llegara allí. Mi hijo Joe se unió a la Marina después de la escuela secundaria y estaba en su primer año en San Diego. Nuestra hija Gloria se casó con su amor de la infancia el año pasado y acababa de mudarse a Dallas. Eso dejaba solo a Sara y a mí. Echaba de menos a los niños, pero esperaba envejecer con mi esposa. Ella era la única mujer que me había interesado, y ahora todo estaba. Si Sara estaba teniendo una aventura, lo ocultaba bien. Por supuesto, nunca la vigilé. Nunca miré sus correos electrónicos o llamadas telefónicas. No tenía razones para hacerlo. No tenía forma de saber qué estaba haciendo en el trabajo o después del trabajo. Confiaba en ella completamente. Ion, ¿dónde demonios has estado? ¿Quieres huevos o algo? No, solo café. No me sentía con muchas ganas de hablar. ¿Qué pasa, cariño? Solo son 3 días. Puedes venir si quieres, pero te aburrirás como una ostra. No, realmente no quiero ir, pero odio dejarte sola. Me preocupo cuando no estás aquí. Es muy dulce, querido, pero estará bien. No voy a salir del hotel en todo este tiempo. Pasaré la mayor parte del día asegurándome de que la sala de conferencias esté lista, y esta noche tendré una agradable charla con nuestros posibles clientes. Mañana, probablemente ni siquiera tendré la oportunidad de ir al baño. Llegaré a casa lo más temprano posible el viernes, te prometo un gran fin de semana si sabes a lo que me refiero. Todo eso suena bien, pero no puedes culparme por preocuparme. Soy un mecánico de autos, y tengo una esposa hermosa y exitosa. A veces tengo la sensación de que estás menos interesada en mejorar nuestra situación familiar que en avanzar en tu carrera. Detente, maldita sea, Ion. Siempre he respetado lo que haces para ganarte la vida y nunca he insinuado lo contrario. Criaste a 2 grandes niños y me pusiste a través de la universidad. Eres un gran esposo, un gran padre y un buen proveedor, y nunca olvides eso. Terminé mi café mientras ella recogía la mesa. ¿Quieres que te llame? No, no es una buena idea. Tendré el móvil apagado, y voy a apagar el teléfono de la habitación por la noche para poder dormir. Te llamaré siempre que pueda. La ayudé a cargar el coche, era tan meticulosa con eso como con todo lo demás. Trabajando, le llevaría 3 horas llegar al Hotel Dicen. Me quedé en el porche y la vi marcharse. No me molesté en preguntarle por las pastillas. Pasé el resto de la mañana en el porche. No recuerdo haberme preocupado tanto como ahora. Me sentía pequeño e insignificante. Me sentía fuera de mi liga. Era un tipo de pueblo con un trabajo mediocre y una esposa exitosa. Era una combinación equivocada. Debería haberlo notado antes. Me sentía estúpido. El mejor traje que tenía era una chaqueta azul y un par de pantalones. Al menos tenía algunas corbatas, aunque tenían 10 años de antigüedad. Acababa de terminar de vestirme cuando sonó el teléfono fijo. Oye, cariño, solo quería avisarte de que llegué bien. ¿Tuviste un buen viaje? Supongo que el tráfico no estaba demasiado denso. Estuvo bien. Te llamaré esta noche. Ahora tengo que irme. Estoy en la habitación 714, Sara. Puedo estar en casa de mis padres o en la de mis hermanos esta noche si quieres llamarme a mi móvil. De acuerdo. Suena el teléfono móvil. Te quiero, tengo que irme. Me tomé mi tiempo para llegar a Filadelfia. No fui directo al Dicen, Primero me detuve y compré un filete con queso. Prometía hacer una larga noche. No estaba seguro de qué iba a hacer. Estacioné en el garaje del hotel y simplemente esperé. Tarde o temprano, tenía que entrar en el hotel. Simplemente no podía decidir cuándo hacerlo. El sonido de mi teléfono celular me ayudó a tomar mi decisión. Ion, solo quería avisarte de que todo se ha arreglado. Ahora voy a bajar para encontrarme con algunas personas y cenar. No olvidaste nada, ¿verdad? No, todo está bien. Tengo todo en mi habitación para mañana. ¿Necesitas algo? No, Ion, relájate. Voy a apagar mi teléfono. Te llamaré mañana por la mañana. ¿De acuerdo? Ríe, diviértete. No es divertido, Ion, es trabajo. No parecía estar demasiado fuera de lugar. El vestíbulo, el restaurante y las salas de conferencias estaban llenos de gente, así que pude pasar desapercibido. Había un folleto pequeño y bonito que mostraba el diseño de todas las habitaciones del hotel. Me paseé por las diferentes habitaciones y me detuve en las paredes, mirando alrededor entre la multitud. No tenía ni idea de qué haría si Sara me veía. Lo averiguaría si y cuando eso sucediera. Encontré un tablero de eventos que enumeraba todas las habitaciones que estaban siendo utilizadas por los diversos grupos. Bixler Enterprises no tenía habitaciones disponibles para el miércoles por la noche. Esto me pareció interesante. Sara había dicho que no iba a salir del hotel, pero ahora no estaba tan seguro de eso. Había 3 comedores, familiar, informal y de alta cocina. A Sara no le gustaba mucho cenar con niños, así que fui primero al comedor informal. Solo me llevó 5 minutos asegurarme de que no estaba allí. Tuve mejor suerte en el salón gourmet, era una acogedora mesita encajada en la esquina, el tipo de mesa que la gente reserva para tener un encuentro privado. Sara llevaba un vestido de cóctel negro con un escote pronunciado y perlas, se veía elegante y su acompañante parecía apreciarlo. Conocía a algunas personas con las que trabajaba Sara, y él no era una de ellas. Me resultaba familiar, pero no había forma de que pudiera recordarlo. Había muchas sillas libres, así que no tuve problemas para cruzar la sala. Había velas y pequeños candelabros de cristal en las mesas. Apagué la mía y le dije al camarero que me molestaba por el glaucoma. Pedí el plato de pollo de siempre y me acomodé. El camarero me sirvió el café por tercera vez. Disculpe, el tipo en la mesa de enfrente me parece muy familiar. ¿Sabes quién es? Sí, ese es Malcolm Eugene Foote. Es miembro del Consejo Municipal, se espera que se postule para el Congreso en los próximos años. ¿Es esa su esposa con él? Es muy bonita. No, esta es la primera vez que la veo. Siempre usa esa mesa para señoras especiales, si me entiende. Simplemente le sonreí y pedí la cuenta. Nunca había visto a Sara tan sensual con un hombre antes. Parecía captar cada palabra que decía, como si fuera Dios o algo así. No estaban haciendo nada inapropiado, pero tampoco era platónico ni profesional. Cuando me fui, estaban terminando su segunda botella de vino. Ahora entendía por qué se había llevado su lencería elegante. Me acomodé en una esquina del vestíbulo para que no me vieran. 10 minutos después, salieron del restaurante. Ella le tomaba la mano mientras caminaban por el vestíbulo hacia el ascensor. Observé cuidadosamente los indicadores de piso. Que el ascensor se detuviera en el tercer piso era una buena señal, significaba que no lo había llevado a su habitación. Era una mala señal cuando el ascensor no llegaba al 7º piso, significaba que ella fue a su habitación. Por si acaso me equivocaba en algo, me senté en el vestíbulo y observé el ascensor durante 1 hora. La gente entraba y salía, pero Sara no estaba entre ellos. Saqué mi maleta vacía del coche y me dirigí al mostrador de recepción. Aunque podía demostrar que era su esposo, me costó trabajo conseguir una tarjeta llave. Se dieron después de llamar a la habitación, pero nadie respondió. Finalmente, estaba en camino a la habitación 714 con la tarjeta llave. Ni siquiera encendí las luces al principio, simplemente me senté en la oscuridad de la habitación durante más de una hora. No fue difícil asegurarme de que no regresara a la habitación. Primero, empacé todas sus ropas y pertenencias personales. No dejé nada atrás. Revisé el paquete de Preven, todavía quedaban 10 pastillas en el tocador. De manera muy ordenada, estaban todos los artículos que necesitaría para su presentación al día siguiente. Comencé a llenar la maleta. Había 24 carpetas promocionales especialmente encuadernadas y otras 20 carpetas regulares, todas ellas fueron a la maleta. Un proyector digital fue lo siguiente, seguido de una computadora portátil. Tomé su bolso y su celular, que había dejado en la habitación. Todo lo que tenía consigo era un bolso de mano y probablemente un tubo de lápiz labial. Di una vuelta por la habitación tan cuidadosamente como lo hizo ella para asegurarme de no perder nada. Una vez satisfecho, dejé las llaves del coche y mi anillo de bodas en el tocador. Aparte de esos 2 objetos, la habitación estaba completamente vacía. El ascensor se dirigió directamente al estacionamiento, no tuve problemas para llevar 2 maletas, y 20 minutos después, estaba en la autopista rumbo al norte. Pasaban las 3 de la madrugada, no tenía idea de que había pasado tanto tiempo. 1 hora o 2 después, sonó mi teléfono celular, la identificación de llamadas mostraba el número del Listen. ¿Ion? Sí, ¿dónde estás? Estaré en casa pronto. Eso fue todo lo que dije. Hubo silencio en el otro extremo de la línea. Los vendedores tienen un viejo dicho, el primero que habla pierde. Pareció una eternidad antes de que ella hablara. Ion, lo siento. No preguntó nada y simplemente colgó. Apagué mi teléfono, era obvio que había regresado a su habitación. Más tarde ese día, tenía que dar una presentación que salvaría a su empresa y le daría un ascenso. Metí las maletas en el desván del garaje. Sara nunca iba allí y nunca pensó en buscar algo allí. Por supuesto, en este punto, estoy bastante seguro de que no importaba. Primero, recogí todas mis ropas y pertenencias personales. La mayoría de los hombres tienen sus propias herramientas, generalmente es un requisito para el trabajo. Pasé por la tienda, cargué las mías en el Subaru y recogí mi último cheque de pago. Para entonces, los bancos ya estaban abiertos, no tuve que hacer ninguna manipulación financiera complicada. Simplemente retiré todo el dinero de mis cuentas. Almorcé en Hagerstown, Maryland. Tenía suficiente dinero para vivir durante unos años, pero sabía que estaría buscando trabajo muy pronto. Sara y yo éramos parecidos en eso de que a ambos nos encantaba trabajar. La voy a extrañar. Pasé un par de horas en las cuevas del Uray y alquilé una habitación cerca de Whitewell. No tenía idea de qué iba a hacer. Era sábado, y me encontré sentado en el acuario de Chattanooga, observando la naturaleza que nunca había visto antes. Pasé unas horas simplemente relajándome y decidí que era un buen lugar para estar. Compré un pase anual para el acuario y, para la hora de la cena, tenía un lugar donde quedarme. Era un remolque móvil en el parque, pero estaba amueblado y era económico. No necesitaba mucho. La primera cosa que haría el lunes por la mañana sería conseguir un trabajo. Un buen hombre de mantenimiento siempre puede conseguir un trabajo, especialmente si está dispuesto a trabajar duro. Podría permanecer discreto hasta que fuera el momento de renovar mi licencia de conducir o las etiquetas del coche. Me preocuparé por eso cuando llegue el momento. El domingo por la tarde, llamé a Gloria. Me sentí obligado a informarle sobre lo que estaba sucediendo, pero Sara ya se lo había contado. Fue bastante franca con Gloria sobre lo que había pasado. Dijo que había engañado, que la sorprendí, que me fui y que ella perdió su trabajo. Me sentí mal porque ella perdió su trabajo, pero ese era el precio que tenía que pagar. Le pedí a Gloria que le dijera a Josh lo que estaba sucediendo la próxima vez que hablara con él. También le dije que la llamaría aproximadamente una vez al mes para verificar cómo iban las cosas. No le dije dónde estaba. para el mediodía del día siguiente, tenía un trabajo. En realidad, estaba a poca distancia del parque de remolques, con el Waffle House a mitad de camino. ¿Qué más podría querer un hombre? No sé cómo manejaron el papeleo, pero me estaban pagando $20 por hora sin hacer preguntas. Estaba feliz, y ellos también. Ni siquiera tendría que tocar el dinero que traje conmigo. Unos 2 meses después, Gloria me informó que Sara se había mudado de la casa y estaba viviendo con sus padres. Gloria no sabía nada más, pero estaba feliz de que estuviera estable y le estuviera yendo bien. Josh me llamó desde San Diego solo para informarme que iba a hacer un crucero. Era técnico en aviónica en un portaaviones, intentó explicar qué hacía exactamente, pero estaba más allá de mi comprensión. Nunca supe mucho sobre cosas técnicas. Ambos tuvieron cuidado de no decir nada malo sobre su madre, aprecié eso. Después de eso, todo siguió como siempre. Comencé a hablar con Gloria al menos semanalmente, Josh y yo comenzamos a enviar correos electrónicos regularmente. Gloria hablaba regularmente con Sara, pero decía muy poco sobre lo que estaba haciendo o dónde estaba. Nunca presenté la solicitud de divorcio, y parece que Sara tampoco lo hizo. Tengo una licencia de conducir de Tennessee y las etiquetas en el Subaru. Comencé a frecuentar un bar local un par de veces al mes y tuve encuentros casuales, 2 mujeres se alternaban como mis compañeras nocturnas regulares. No buscaban compromisos, y yo tampoco, parecía funcionar bien para todos nosotros. La vida era buena. Eso fue hace mucho tiempo, y gradualmente olvidé a Sara. Con el tiempo, el Subaru comenzó a darme problemas, había olvidado cuánto tiempo había pasado. Tenía más de 200,000 millas. Estaba reflexionando sobre esto con una jarra de cerveza un día cuando me di cuenta de que habían pasado casi 5 años desde que me fui de casa. Mantuve un contacto cercano con ambos hijos, Gloria ya tenía 2 hijos propios en este momento y quería que los visitara. Josh casi se casó con una mujer tailandesa, pero en el último momento, se negó. Por lo general, trabajaba 6 días a la semana y usaba el domingo para recuperarme del sábado por la noche, no había ninguna buena razón para que alguien llamara a la puerta de mi remolque a las 6 de la mañana de un viernes. Su grosería fue recompensada por un hombre medio desnudo abriendo la puerta, los calzoncillos del día son repugnantes, y la dama en la puerta, juzgando por la expresión en su rostro, estuvo de acuerdo conmigo. Ella apartó la mirada, pero su compañero no parecía impresionado. Norm habría usado pantalones, pero en un momento como este, los invitados me molestaron. Estamos buscando a John Terrell. No los conozco. Me llamo David Simmons, y esta es mi esposa Mara. Tenemos un problema y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Lo siento mucho, no trabajo a altas horas de la noche. Si necesitan algo relacionado con su auto, tendrán que ir a la tienda. Esto provocó varias miradas en blanco y finalmente una respuesta. No tiene nada que ver con tu trabajo, es más un problema personal. ¿Podemos entrar? El interior del remolque lucía desordenado, rara vez tenía invitados, así que rara vez lo limpiaba. Incluso mis novias insistían en que fuéramos a su lugar. Hagan como en su casa, déjenme ponerme los pantalones enseguida. Al entrar en el dormitorio, dejé la puerta abierta solo para mostrarles lo hospitalario que soy. También me puse una camisa. ¿Les gustaría tomar café? Solo tomará unos 10 minutos. Aparté algunas cosas del sofá para que pudieran sentarse, no hubo respuesta a la pregunta del café. Tenemos una hija adoptiva de 4 años y otra de 2 que necesita un trasplante de médula ósea, y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Estamos dispuestos a pagarte si es necesario. ¿Con mi médula ósea? No, queremos usarla y estamos dispuestos a compensarte por cualquier inconveniente. Creo que quieren comprarla. Estaba actuando como un listillo, y de repente me di cuenta de ello. Estas personas eran serias, tenían un problema real y estaban buscando ayuda. Lo siento mucho, no quise interrumpir. Por favor, continúen. nuestra mejor oportunidad de encontrar un donante es un familiar cercano. Eres nuestra mejor esperanza. Mira esto. No quiero ser un grosero, pero creo que se equivocaron de persona. ¿Cuándo nació su hija? Cumplirá 5 años en julio. Marge Simmons habló por primera vez, y sonó sincera. Odio ser el portador de malas noticias, pero me hice una vasectomía hace 15 años. No hay forma de que pueda ser su padre. ¿Por qué tu nombre estaba en el certificado de nacimiento? No puedo responder eso, tal vez deberían preguntarle a su madre. Esa afirmación fue recibida con silencio. Sentí pena por estas personas, pero no sabía cómo ayudarles. ¿Cuál es el nombre de la madre? Sarah Lise Terrell. No encontraba las palabras. Tal vez no debería haber tomado esas malditas pastillas de ella, por supuesto, entonces esas personas no tendrían una hija en absoluto. Todo lo que pensaba que había superado el dolor, y aquí está de nuevo, viejos recuerdos de mi esposa teniendo relaciones sexuales con ese maldito político de Filadelfia. Estaba empezando a olvidarlo todo, y ahora estaba de vuelta. Maldita sea. Ahora entiendo y pido disculpas por mi grosería e insensibilidad. Haré todo lo que esté en mi poder para ayudarles. En primer lugar, porque no puede Sara hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Médicamente, no puede. ¿Por qué no? Es madre, tiene que ser una donante adecuada. Ella es una donante adecuada, pero está demasiado enferma. Los médicos se negaron siquiera a considerar utilizarla. ¿Enferma de qué? Está muriendo de insuficiencia hepática. Le quedan menos de 6 meses de vida. Esto no tiene sentido. Siempre ha estado perfectamente sana. Además, no creo que un hígado enfermo le impida donar médula ósea. El hospital no aceptará su firma en el formulario de consentimiento. ¿Estás diciendo que hay algo mal en su cabeza? Ambos me miraron en silencio, sabían la respuesta, pero no querían decirlo. En ese momento, no quería que se sintieran aún más incómodos. Hace 10 minutos, no me importaban, pero ahora sentía que tenía que protegerlos y ayudarlos. ¿Cómo sucedió esto? ¿Podría alguno de mis hijos ayudar? Quizás, pero pensamos que eras nuestra mejor esperanza. ¿Por qué no van tras su padre, su verdadero padre? Pensamos que eras tú. No tenemos ni idea de quién más podría ser. Sara no nos dijo nada sobre otro posible padre. De hecho, ella no estaba en condiciones de explicar nada, agregó Mara. Obtuvimos la mayoría de nuestra información de la agencia de adopción. Tuve que preparar café y hacer pis, permítanme un momento. Dejé a mis invitados sentados mientras preparaba el café. Solo tomó unos minutos. Mientras se preparaba, fui al baño, algo que necesitaba hacer urgentemente. Traté de ser discreto, ya había avergonzado lo suficiente a Mara. ¿Dónde viven? En Westchester, Pensilvania. Les haré una oferta. Si les digo quién es el verdadero padre de su hija, deben prometerme que lo perseguirán sin descanso hasta obtener lo que desean. ¿De qué estás hablando? El padre de su hija es un político prominente en Pensilvania. Por supuesto, negará todo y probablemente les proporcionará documentos legales para detener sus esfuerzos. Si acuerdan presionar lo suficiente para que él admita que la niña es suya, podrán avergonzarlo y obligarlo a hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Eso es lo que quieren, ¿verdad? Sí, claro, pero ¿cómo hacemos eso? No lo sé. Soy mecánico. Trabajo con metal para ganarme la vida. Creo que la mejor manera sería utilizar la televisión, la radio y los periódicos. Los políticos harán cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. ¿Tienen amigos que puedan ayudar? Bueno, ahora ambos estaban sonriendo. Debo haber dicho algo que les dio esperanza. Creo que podemos hacer esto. ¿Quién demonios es él? Malcolm Eugene Foote. Se postula para el Senado de los Estados Unidos. Apuesto a que hará cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. El café estaba listo, pero David y Marche no podían esperar para llegar a casa. Antes de irse, les dije cómo ponerse en contacto con Gloria y Josh en caso de que los necesitaran. Estaba seguro de que ayudarían. También les pedí que me dijeran dónde estaba Sarah. Probablemente estaría en Pensacola antes de que ellos regresaran a Westchester. Me corté el pelo y compré una camisa nueva. Sarah era una tramposa que arruinó mi vida, pero aún así quería lucir bien cuando la viera. Era otro remolque, pero esta vez era un bonito doble nuevo. Allí estaba su Volvo con una llanta desinflada y un parabrisas roto. La mujer que abrió la puerta no era Sarah, parecía que la habían empapado fuerte y la habían dejado empapada. Tenía al menos 45, tal vez 50, y debió haber tenido una vida difícil. La falta de maquillaje no ayudaba y simplemente se veía horrible. No tuve la oportunidad de abrir la boca. Caray, si no es John Terrell. Nunca esperé verte aquí. Tuve que usar la vieja línea, me estás poniendo en desventaja. Sherry Hart. Pasa, entra. ¿Quieres una cerveza? No, pero gracias. Estoy aquí para ver a Sarah. Sherry cruzó la habitación y se detuvo en el buffet del comedor. Aquí está, John. Mírala todo lo que quieras. Su mano señalaba una urna de latón que estaba en el centro del buffet vacío. Supongo que llegué demasiado tarde. No me moví, solo me quedé mirando el contenedor frente a mí. ¿Puedo tomar una cerveza ahora? Sarah se mudó a Pensacola después de dar a su bebé en adopción. Compró el remolque con el dinero que recibió de Bixler Enterprises después de que la despidieron. Tenía una participación en las ganancias, 401k, y vacaciones y días de enfermedad. Eventualmente, consiguió un trabajo en una fábrica local de prendas de vestir donde trabajaba en el departamento de envíos. Allí fue donde conoció a Sherry. Sherry alquilaba una habitación de Sarah. Cada centavo que Sarah ganaba iba para el alcohol. Empezó con vino y gradualmente pasó a bebidas más fuertes, las más baratas. Eventualmente, perdió su trabajo debido a su alcoholismo y se vio obligada a usar sus ahorros. Nunca salió con nadie ni salió a ningún lado. Sherry se quedó con ella, pagó sus servicios públicos y compró alimentos que Sarah no comía. Le llevó más de 3 años quitarse la vida. Increíblemente, ella tenía un testamento y me dejó un doble remolque y un Volvo. Sherry explicó que Sarah estaba tan angustiada por lo que había hecho que simplemente se rindió. No intentó evitar el embarazo ni siquiera terminarlo. La adopción se había arreglado meses antes de que naciera el bebé. Nunca volvió a trabajar, excepto en los trabajos clandestinos que hacía mal. Sherry dijo que Sarah no parecía tener ambición ni propósito en la vida. Sarah hablaba mucho de mí pero tenía miedo de intentar contactarme. Gloria le dio mi número, pero nunca me llamó. Era como si su aventura de una noche la hubiera lastimado más a ella que a mí. Estuve allí durante 2 semanas y luego vendí el remolque de Sherry por $1 y obtuve $3,000 por el Volvo. 2 días después, estaba en Westchester visitando a mis nuevos amigos David y Marche. Malcolm Eugene Foote resistió al principio, pero David y Marche lo presionaron hasta que cedió. Insistió en pruebas de ADN, que demostraron que era el padre. Para salvar la cara, más o menos lo obligaron a someterse a un trasplante de médula ósea, que fue exitoso. La carrera política y la vida familiar de Malcolm no dejaron una impresión favorable. Su caída en las encuestas fue tan rápida que el partido lo reemplazó por otro candidato unos meses antes de las elecciones. Su esposa solicitó el divorcio y fue muy pública al respecto. Sarah y yo estamos viajando ahora a Dallas para ver a Gloria y a mis nietos. No sé cuánto tiempo mantendré a Sarah conmigo, probablemente hasta que tenga a alguien.